You're listening to the Kelly Green Hour for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANY Podcast or visit us on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Kelly Green Hour. Yes, we are back. Philadelphia Eagles football is back. Life can return to normal. I am your host, as always, LJ Harrell, and joining me today is our friend Connor. Connor, before you say anything, I want to say congratulations on getting your master's, if I'm not mistaken.
I want master's in management.
Yeah, congratulations, my friend. Did you have a good time over in London? You went to London, right? The UK?
I went Liverpool, yeah, but we did like Liverpool, London, and Amsterdam. It was pretty sweet. So much different than Canada and the US, like unreal.
I bet it is. What you do that for about a week and a half, 2 weeks?
Yeah, it was like 10 days. I mean, I guess you can call it 8 because one day was literally dedicated to travel. Yeah.
Wow, I mean, like I said, congratulations. Good to hear that you're expanding your horizons, getting that extra degree, and hopefully something good comes from it.
I agree. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, before we get started with this segment of the Kelly Green Hour, this segment is brought to you by Just Food Catering Services. Treat yourself, take it home. Go visit our friend Rob at Just Food, or you can give them a call, 215-794-FOOD. That's 215-794-3663. All right, we've been waiting for a long time to finally get back to Eagles football, Connor, and we have it. Training camp is underway. We went through the long malaise of having just baseball. Look, I like baseball, but let's be real. It's no longer America's pastime. The game, if you're a diehard baseball fan, yeah, you enjoy it. If you're Shane, you enjoy it, even if the Phillies are underachieving by a lot. But, if you are just that laissez-faire fan, you just use baseball as background noise. That's what I pretty much do. I mean, I go to a couple games here and there a year, but, there's nothing like football. Yes, the first preseason game was the other day. I don't care if it was the fourth stringers for Denver and Atlanta. I was watching the game. Why? Because it's football. I didn't know who caught that game-winning touchdown for Denver. He's probably not even going to make the team. But do I care? No, because it's football. And this is, football is what we wait for. Football is, if it could be it is technically a 52-week type of sport, because there is no off season when it comes to football. There are so many storylines, not even just for the Eagles. When you talk about the Le'Veon Bell thing, the Zeke Elliott thing that's happening now, Melvin Gordon who requesting a trade, Michael Thomas getting the big contract, whatever it is, it doesn't just fall in a 6-month period. All this happens throughout the course of an entire year.
Agreed. And I mean, I do dynasty fantasy football too, so you're constantly just reading and looking at new information and trying to understand who's the big buy, who do you gotta get, who do you gotta, like, these under the radar moves and stuff that you can get away with, and doing the rookie draft right after the rookie draft happens in the NFL too. And it's just and those storylines are unreal. Like me and some buddies were talking about it today, about how the players complain so much, but they control the league and the owner's money so much more than any other sports league.
No. The NBA players run the league.
The issue that I have with that is Zeke Elliott has 2 years left on his contract, and he literally can decide, I'm not playing until I get paid more.
Yeah, but
all he has to do is pay a fine.
Yeah,
in the NBA, who holds out in the NBA? Tell me who holds out.
You want to know why people don't hold out? Because the owners give in. the owners in the NFL don't give in. If Zeke Elliott were to hold out this year, he loses a year, accrued year. So he still has 2 years technically left on his contract. So it's because the NBA, Anthony Davis says, look, I'm not playing for New Orleans. I want to be traded. What happens? He gets traded. Paul George, now this was behind closed doors. Nobody heard about it until it happened. But Paul George goes to OKC and tells them, look, I want to be traded. What happens? He gets traded. Like the players run the NBA. And Steve Kerr even said it. Like he talked about, I know we're getting off on getting away from football, but Steve Kerr said that trade, that Anthony Davis forcing his way out of New Orleans is bad for the league because he still had he had a year or whatever it is left on his deal. But like New Orleans in theory didn't have to trade him, but he was not going to play for them. LeBron James runs the NBA. Adam Silver does not run the NBA. You're not going to say Tom Brady does not run the NFL. Everybody knows that Roger Goodell and his $40 million a year bloated salary or whatever it is that he makes, the last word is Roger Goodell. Tom Brady's not going to go tell Roger Goodell what to do. If Roger Goodell wants to suspend Tom Brady like he did a couple years back, he will suspend
it happens.
Tom Brady. Exactly.
And I mean, while you bring up Tom Brady, should we wish him a happy birthday on this podcast?
We can wish him a happy birthday after we beat him in Super Bowl 54.
Because it was funny. I was listening to people talk today about how this is the first year that Tom Brady is going into a contract year and he's not getting an extension. Maybe it's people making a big scene of it, or maybe he might actually be considering this as his final year. But
he wants to play another 5 years. But let's be real. It's almost like the head coach of Greg Popovich, he coaches year to year with the San Antonio Spurs. That's pretty much what Tom Brady's doing at the quarterback position. He has a quote unquote lifetime deal with the Patriots until they don't want him anymore. If he's still going to be productive.
He has it after that. Like he's going to be a coach. He's going to be an advisor.
That
man is a Patriot for life.
Yeah, but like, Bill Belichick, Bob Kraft, they're not going to, if Tom Brady wants to come back, they're not going to be like, no, you can't come back. We're going to move on to Danny Etling or something, whoever the heck is their backup quarterback. But that, Tom Brady isn't going anywhere unless Tom Brady wants to go somewhere. And Tom Brady, he's in a position to where he doesn't have to worry about money. His wife makes more money than him. Let's be real.
Oh, and his endorsements basically cover him for life too. He doesn't need the salary. That's why he's not like every other NFL quarterback and is saying, give me $20 million a year and build me a team and I'll run you to the Super Bowl every year kind of deal.
Yeah, and that's why the Patriots have been so good. All right, let's get away from the Patriots. We'll see them in February. We'll beat them February 2nd, I think Super Bowl Sunday is, and we'll celebrate.
Hey, we play them before that.
That's very true. We play them in November, so we'll see them twice this year.
So we'll talk about them in November.
Yes, sir, we will. Okay, let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles. They have an absolute stacked roster, but we all know that the one thing that can hinder a season in which there are high expectations and Super Bowl aspirations are injuries. When you're looking at on the defensive side of the ball, Jalen Mills, who's been out since October with what they call a foot sprain, hasn't practiced yet. Ronnie McLeod, ACL injury, hasn't practiced much. Ronald Darby, ACL injury, hasn't practiced much. Derek Barnett, shoulder surgery last year, hasn't done much team stuff, but has done some individual drills. Are we worried that I know it's still early in training camp. There's still we have a month and 6 days until the first game of the year against Washington at the Link. Should we be worried, or do we have a couple weeks before we really should have to worry about these injuries coming back to haunt the Eagles?
First of all, I want to say you're very generous in the way you stopped there. You left a couple more injuries out, so it's not nice to leave it at that.
Who am I missing? Nigel Bradham.
Cravon LeBlanc, Brandon Brooks. Two guys who probably won't be playing week one. The two that are the biggest concerns.
Brandon Brooks actually might play. He's been practicing that. I'm not worried about Brandon Brooks.
I can't believe that man might play. You look at Jalen Mills, who's had this weird-ass foot sprain, and he can't play. And Brooks went and what he tore, didn't he tear his Achilles? Like it was a pretty gruesome injury. And this man is like barely 6 months removed, and this man wants to play.
And I've always said that the reason why the Eagles lost that New Orleans game was after his injury, they could not run the ball. So he is a key part to the offensive line. I think he's going to play week 1. All the videos I've seen on, Instagram and all from the Eagles videos, and he is determined to be out there. And I will not be surprised if you see him lining up next to Kelsey and Johnson week 1 at the right guard position.
I believe it is important that he does show up, although I'm not worried about the depth of the offensive line right now. But should we worry? No, within reason. I mean, last year I was really worried about the cornerback position, the injuries. We fielded 13 different cornerbacks during the season. And now we step into this season with a similar situation, except that I feel like I have more confidence. I feel like, because Rodney McLeod, you talk about Rodney McLeod, and we just signed Cyprien. We got Blake Countess. We got Sendejo. We got we got all these potential replacements who are way better than what we had, Trey Sullivan and Corey Graham last year.
Trey Sullivan is still there, and he'll probably make the team because he's really good on special teams.
Agreed, and it's not. I'm not bashing Sullivan, but I'm saying these options make me confident McLeod can take his time. Whereas last year,
the Eagles also, not to cut you off, they also redid his contract to where they're paying him like a backup. Do you think there's a chance that he gets cut, or do you think it's kind of a definite that he is on the team and they're just going to let him take it slow because they have Sendejo, they have Countess, they have Sullivan, they now have Cyprien, they have players that have played the position and started in the NFL, especially with Sendejo and Cyprien? Or is there a chance that, maybe McLeod is so far gone that they're not even going to have him on the roster?
I still think he'll end up being on the roster. I mean, I don't see him going. If there's anyone you cut, you probably go with you cut a Sendejo, or you cut the Countess, or whoever you might want to cut otherwise. But I mean, I think he's a lock to be on the team. I just think they're going to give him his time. I mean, given how good of a player he is when healthy and the amount of money we're paying him, I don't see any reason to let him go or to move on from him yet. But as far as other injuries go, I mean, the cornerback position I feel a lot better about because Sidney Jones apparently is playing out in training camp, according to reports and videos I'm seeing. And Rasul Douglas, who I talk about endlessly, is showing up. And basically everyone you needed to show up is showing up. And so it makes the injury seem a lot less. Maybe we're overreacting to training camp, but it makes the injury seem a lot less serious the way the team's looking right now.
Yeah, and the way that Howie has built this team, I talked about earlier. I mentioned off the top how this roster is loaded. They have so much depth. Now they might be lacking depth at maybe defensive end, at maybe linebacker. But, when you look at that back end of the secondary, we're missing 3 guys that played a lot last year. But you mentioned Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Avonte Maddox. They're probably your week 1 starters. And you've been high on Rasul Douglas. I've been high on Sidney Jones. And now is the time that, Sidney Jones is 100% healthy. He put his body through a lot throughout the offseason to get himself 100% healthy. And he's showing out in practice. He's been, by all accounts, from all the tweets and everything we've seen, he's been the standout star in training camp so far. If he can stay on the field, we might finally see that first round top 15 type of talent before he tore his Achilles at his pro day a couple years back at Washington.
Yeah, he's definitely looks like he's got a lot more confidence, and he's got confidence in his ankle, like Shane's talked about, getting that confidence in the injured area versus yourself back is so vital when you have those injuries, because you're afraid that one jab step could be the end and you just tear something again or you pull something again. So, I mean, I think that is huge to have those three guys stepping up in this place, and knowing that Darby will be back, knowing that Mills and LeBlanc, I'll say with a grain of salt, because they both have, I guess they have a similar foot sprain, similar foot injury.
Cravon has a Liz Frank injury apparently.
Which is
I think is worse than a.
Yeah, I was reading about it, and it was kind of the report said that he would be out till September if there's no setbacks, but potentially November, but there seems to be no certain date on that.
Yeah, and as much as Cravon LeBlanc came in last year and he struggled early on, but he found his way in the secondary. If we're being honest, if everybody is healthy, he's the sixth corner. I mean, he's not going to be ahead of Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, or Avonte Maddox. Probably not going to be ahead of Ronald Darby, and most likely not ahead of Jalen Mills. How many corners are the Eagles actually going to keep? And Cravon LeBlanc probably could have been somebody that is on the outside looking in, somebody that could have been up in New York with the Jets and Joe Douglas if he was healthy. So having LeBlanc out isn't necessarily that big of a deal. And I'm only saying that now because we have a lot of depth at the cornerback position. We've always talked about how they have quantity. They needed to find the quality. And that's what they're finally starting to see in the Sidney Joneses, in the Rasul Douglases. And we already know what we have in Avonte Maddox, and it's going to be really interesting to see how things going forward is if everybody can stay healthy.
Yeah, I think they were just so young, and the expectation was so high on some of these guys. But I mean, these guys were not Jalen Ramsey. These guys, we didn't bring them in expecting them to be number one shutdown corners.
Sidney Jones probably after a couple years.
Probably after a couple years, but you knew you were going to be waiting on that one.
Yeah, and let's go over to the offensive side of the ball. We've heard nothing but good things about the Carson Wentz, Deshaun Jackson connection. Carson has to adjust to Deshaun Jackson's speed and hitting him down the field on long balls. But I always see video of after practice, Deshaun and Carson going over whatever route they may have struggled with during that day's practice. They're always together. I love this. I think that having that element, which we always talk about, the Eagles were sorely missing that deep element ever since Deshaun left. Was it 5, 6, 7 years ago? Whatever it was. This is going to be key for this Eagles offense because it's going to open up everything else. It's going to open up the middle of the field for the tight ends. It's going to open up the lanes for the running backs. They're going to actually be able to run the ball consistently because you're going to have a deep safety because even at the age of 32, Deshaun Jackson still can burn it down the field.
Oh, yeah. In the videos we've seen, I mean, he's lightning. I mean, Wentz's throws can't even keep up with him sometimes. Like, Wentz can't throw ahead of him. Some of those mistakes are just him throwing behind because he's just not used to that speed and knowing he's got to put that ball ahead.
Yeah, and he doesn't have that Vic arm because Vic never could. Vic could just put it up there and Deshaun's running. It's like a handoff. Deshaun running right under it.
Oh, exactly. So, I mean, it's something definitely that hugely has to be adjusted to. And I've heard so much and seen so many good things from J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, too. And Alshon Jeffrey's doing Alshon Jeffrey things. I think if J.J. Arcega-Whiteside can continue to play out, I find him and Jeffrey very alike and could potentially make Alshon Jeffrey an expendable piece if we need more cap down the road. I mean, hate the concept, but maybe.
I agree with you there, but I also think that Arcega-Whiteside can play some of the slot, and this is probably Nelson, unless Nelson Aguilar goes off for a 1,000 to 1,500 yard type of season with 75 catches. This could be his last year here, and I could see Arcega-Whiteside. If we get towards the end of the year and we start seeing Arcega-Whiteside on the field more than Nelson Aguilar, that could be if you look at it, you have your rookie that you drafted, you have somebody on the last year of his contract that's going to want big money. We could keep Alshon. You have the Alshon and you have Deshaun on the outside, and you put Arcega-Whiteside in the slot. I mean, I see that being potentially the move that the Eagles decide to make instead of getting rid of Alshon. But, I mean, I get what you're saying because Alshon and Arcega-Whiteside have a similar body type.
Exactly. That's my thought to it. I mean, I don't think Aguilar's back because, I mean, he's making, what, $9 million this year? The idea that he might command more is just not in our salary cap. And look at the battle at wide receiver right now. We got like Greg Ward fighting for a position, Braxton Miller fighting for a position, that massive dude on the outside whose name slips my mind right now. What is his name?
For the
One
Eagles?
second. I got this name. So Carlton Ogudozie.
Yeah,
like
I've heard
6'7".
I've heard he's having a big camp too.
Exactly. So, I mean, and then you got Shelton Gibson. Then you got the mysterious story of Mac Hollins. I mean, there's a lot of potential, but I mean, and then Mark and Michelle, there's so much potential that if you let Aguilar go and you keep some of these guys for the practice squad, if you can stash them, I'd be fine with Aguilar going. And I have plenty of confidence because I think suddenly the wide receiver position has become, I find it even more intriguing than the running back position. Because the battle at running back, there's just Smallwood, Scott, and Adams fighting for a potential spot, basically. So it's not really that exciting. But wide receiver, it's like who could get that 5 and 6 wide receiver jobs.
Yeah, I agree with you. Now let's go. I'm glad you brought up Mac Hollins' name. We just talked about all the good of the Eagles. Let's talk about kind of some that. What is going on with Mac Hollins? He does individual drills, then he goes in, puts street clothes on, and comes back out. He's at risk of not making this team. You know, he shouldn't even at this point. Like, if you look at the receivers, we know Alshon, Deshaun, Aguilar, and Arcega-Whiteside are on the team. Given 100%, that there's your top 4. But the question then becomes, A, do the Eagles keep 5 or 6? And B, how much of a difference does the special teams ability of Mac Hollins make? Because, you know, for somebody that missed all of last year with a secret, it's not secret, but like with a suspicious injury and a groin injury, but like you mentioned how you have I can't even, how do you say his name? Ogudozie? I can't. Ogudozie. He's been having a good camp. I put in my roster prediction, I had Mark and Michelle making the team, so he could be on the team. You know, there's a lot of young. Charles Johnson's also having a pretty good. I don't see Charles Johnson making it. He's 32, and he's been all over the league, but he has NFL experience. You know, there's again so much depth at the wide receiver position that Mac Hollins just needs to find a way on the field because he's at risk of not making this team.
Absolutely. I mean, and if it's about special teams ability, I am fine with them wasting, well, I wouldn't say wasting, but using a 6th receiver spot if they see it warranted on Shelton Gibson, who we know can do the special team stuff Mac Hollins can do. They're just the same. And just like Aguilar in his first couple of years who had issues catching a football, maybe Gibson can come around if he knows he's got the team spot because he's a special team specialist. But I mean, I'm more than willing to say goodbye to Hollins if their only thing that they're holding on to is hope and his special team ability.
And the fact that they drafted him in the 4th round.
Yeah, I mean, it hurts when you sit there and you're sending away that 4th round, basically 4th round pick wasted, but it's not like we haven't wasted picks before.
Danny Watkins, Marcus Smith, a lot of names come to mind.
Exactly. So it's not like every team does it. It happens. Mac Hollins, he didn't play. He had this whatever groin injury he had going on. Now he has another potential injury that it just a guy who you can never say what the injury actually is. Like Crayvon LeBlanc, it was mysterious at the start, and then it finally came out because we were trying to figure it out. It's one of those weird injuries. It's one of those ones that you just, I guess, is probably a bit more looking into than whatever is going on with Holland's groin or shoulder or God knows what body parts hurt now.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, I always mention that the Eagles are a stacked roster. So Pro Football Focus put out their couple rankings, and I'm not a big fan of Pro Football Focus because, you know, there was one game that I forget what game it was, but they said that like Brandon Graham was the best player on the field for the Eagles when it was clearly Fletcher Cox, but it's a different story for a different day. They gave the Eagles the top offensive line, the top defensive line, and the top wide receiver corps in all of the NFL. All of the NFL. Do you agree? Like quickly, if you're thinking of the other teams around the league, you think of the Bears defensive line, you think of the Rams defensive line, you think of Dallas's, offensive line. You can think of the Browns wide receiver corps. Are the Eagles deserving of having the top ranking at those three positions?
Honestly, I believe it at offensive and defensive line. I believe that Howie's done the job in the trenches that put us there. I think when you speak to like the Bears and other really good defensive lines, I think you have to think what they have for depth. Because you sit there and you can say, oh my God, look at who they have, Khalil Mack and whoever else is along that line. But then what do they have for depth? Do they have that Timmy Jernigan? Do they have those young prospects or young guys in like Bruce Hector? Like, I think that it comes down to depth too. And I mean, I actually like Pro Football Focus because I find it's very numbers based. It's very analytical. It's not really opinion. It goes solely based on analytical number formula that they have in place for their players. The only one I disagree with would be the wide receiving core. I don't think we have the best. But I mean, you tag in the tight ends and the running backs. Do we have a extremely dangerous offense?
We have the best tight end duo. We have really good receivers. We kind of know what we have at the running back position with Jordan Howard and Darren Sproles. We don't know what we have with Miles Sanders yet. I guess it makes sense. My thing with the defensive line, we know Fletcher Cox, we know Malik Jackson, we know Timmy Jernigan, Brandon and Brandon Graham. We know what we're getting from them. But when you talk about Derek Barnett, is he going to be healthy? Vinny Curry, what are we getting from Josh Sweat? Even though by all accounts he's having a good camp. From Josh, I think it's Josh Osman or whatever the heck his first name is.
Joe Osman.
Thank you, Joe Osman.
And they've been talking him up for like the last 2 years, so it's about time. But I mean, we have to take the Sweat and Osman with a grain of salt because they're just making Jordan Mailata look like a big rabbit stuffed animal.
We know so he should probably move the defensive side of the ball really, but apparently there's been really good battles between Andre Dillard and Josh Sweat, which you like to see. You have two young and hungry guys that are trying to make a name for themselves, that are trying to cement their spot on the roster. We know that Dillard's on the team. We pretty much know that Josh Sweat's on the team, but they don't want to be, handed anything. They want to show that they should be on the team and that they should be given playing time. So you like it when you see these players, giving it their all in practice. And it's going to be even better. In a couple of weeks, the Baltimore Ravens are going to be coming to town and they're going to practice with the Eagles. You're going to get to go up against a pretty good offensive line, for the Ravens with some really good weapons. You're going to get to see Lamar Jackson, Hollywood Brown, if he's going to be practicing, Mark Ingram on their offense, and then that defensive line, they went out and signed a couple guys. So it's, when Baltimore comes to Philly and they do that practice, it's going to be key for these young guys to show that they've learned the system and to show that they can make plays and execute when called upon.
Absolutely. And I mean, I don't want to take anything away from having a good battle with Jordan Mailata or throwing him around like a teddy bear. Cause the guy is 6'8". So, he cannot be that easy to move, even if he's not that experienced along the offensive line. But yeah, I also love to hear about those battles, especially with the young guys, because it flashes signs that they made the right pick. They made the right decision. And where they really want to battle for a spot, and they're going to battle even in training camp or rookie camp or mini camps. They're going to play for that spot for you, and they're going to play for you, which it probably also speaks to Doug Peterson as well. I don't think we can say enough good things about Peterson and his coaching and the way that he runs the team.
Yeah, and you can't say enough good things about Doug Peterson. And a lot of what the Eagles are going to do on offense is going to come from Doug Peterson's brain. So it's going to be good. Let's talk about some of the guys that the Eagles have brought in. They brought back Darren Sproles. They signed Orlando Scandrick. They signed Jonathan Cyprien. The Cyprien and Scandrick moves are, bringing in more veteran guys, bringing in depth pieces. Skandrick wasn't used right in Kansas City last year. He's not that good of a corner, but he's not an outside corner, and that's where the Chiefs had him playing. If the Eagles need somebody to play in the slot, Skandrick can probably do that. And the Eagles got to see a lot of Skandrick when he was with the Cowboys. What are your thoughts on the two signings? And then speak on Darren Sproles, coming back and filling a need on this offense.
Yeah, well, I'll start with Darren Sproles because I love that he came back because, we think we have a Darren Sproles-like player in Boston Scott, but clearly there wasn't the certainty that
they also
Scott's
thought that in
there.
Donnell Pumphrey too.
But it sounds like Scott's leaps and bounds ahead of Pumphrey as far as that goes. It sounds like we have potential there, but they're just not ready to say that it's happening yet. So I think that bringing Sproles back was a great idea. He's a true do-it-all back, I find. And he will run the ball. He will do punt returns. He will do kick returns. You can pass the ball to him. You can dump it off to him when you're in trouble, and he'll probably make something out of nothing. I find he complements the other backs versus takes away from them because, Jordan Howard didn't seem like much of a pass-catching back, but according to reports at a camp, he suddenly is becoming much more of a pass catching back and appreciating Doug Peterson for actually exploiting that in him finally. And just that the special teams ability he could bring, I just think he's a good veteran and team player to have back, especially on a team that's so loaded. To have the back end taken care of our running backs with Darren Sproles, if he can stay fully healthy, is just always great to know that you have a backup plan and he knows your offense and he knows what he's doing. Cyprien was a different one for me. I know that we spoke about it earlier over text, and you were kind of talking about what does this say about this McLeod and what type of shape he's in, and you spoke earlier about cutting McLeod potentially. I think Cyprien's in because he's like Jenkins, like a cheap Jenkins, because he can play linebacker, he can play corner, he can play safety. It's having one of those guys who can play multiple positions, because then say you keep 3 or 4 safeties and that people say, oh, that's a lot of safeties, but you cut back on a corner, you cut back on a linebacker because you have Cyprien and Jenkins who can play multiple positions. So maybe he's there for the flexibility. I don't know if it speaks so much to McLeod.
Yeah, I also think that, they use Jenkins as a linebacker. We always bring up how he was on the field 100% of the time. And maybe, you keep Jenkins and McLeod back at safety, and instead of the 3 linebackers, you're going to have Nigel Bradham and probably Zach Brown on the field, and you bring in a Cyprien to play that rover safety linebacker position.
A more athletic guy who can keep up with the tight ends.
Yep, exactly.
Tight ends and stuff.
Yeah.
But and then Skandrick, meh. Whatever. If he makes the team, he makes the team, but it's probably because Jalen Mills and Cravon LeBlanc end up on the PUP list or something.
Yeah, that was my thought of, that Cravon LeBlanc injury is worse than we thought, or worse than that they're letting on. But again, another depth piece, somebody who's been in the league, somebody who's done it. He hasn't really won many, playoff games being with the Dallas Cowboys. But he's seen every type of receiver. So he can kind of provide knowledge. I don't see him making the team unless Mills can't come back soon.
I think his position on the roster relies solely on how many people end up on the PUP list to actually start the season. So like your Jalen Mills or your Cravon LeBlanc, or Lord help us, we keep Mac Hollins and put him on the PUP list again. If one of those situations, that's the role that would open, that's the position in the roster that would open up for him, I think.
Yeah, that's possible. But yeah, I'm really intrigued over the next couple of weeks as we get into preseason games, how this roster is going to start taking shape. All right, so let's do our inner segment bit here. I don't even know what we're going to call this, but we have 7 categories. We're going to see how similar we are on these, because we seem to be similar a lot. We're We're going to go over the breakout star. And this is just of training camp, right? Is this what we were determining?
I have it for kind of like both, like training camp and the season.
Okay.
Kind of like it doubles up.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to do breakout star, comeback kid, rising star, the don't forget about me, needs to rebound, your dark horse, and your under the radar player. So let's start with your breakout star. You can go first.
My breakout guy is someone who I've talked about endlessly in the limited off-season episodes we've had, and that's Derek Barnett. I think he has to break out. We've spoke about it in prior episodes, how important it is that because we moved on from Michael Bennett and other quality defense, or
Chris Long.
Chris Long, other quality defensive ends, how important it is that Derek Barnett step up and be that guy who we can trust and have faith in to anchor with Brandon Graham. We don't want him to be a rotational guy like this, be a true anchor and his health not be a concern. So I think it's vital that he be one of the big breakout guys.
Yeah, I went with Avonte Maddox, and that's because we have injury concerns at the cornerback position, and I don't want him to have a sophomore slump. A lot of guys do come into that second year, especially after they've had a good first year, and they kind of take it easy. I'm looking at you, Halapuli Vati Vaitai. So Avonte Maddox is going to probably be our slot corner. And if he's needed, he's going to play some safety. And if he's needed, he's going to play on the outside. So I just want to see him to continue his work. And again, by all accounts, he's having a pretty good camp too. We know he has the speed. He's a little, smallish, 5'8", 5'9", but he has the heart. And, I think he's going to break out this year. It's not going to be easy to get big plays out of the slot against the Eagles.
No, agreed.
All right, so next is the comeback kid. I'm going to start with this one. I went with Derek Barnett for this because of his injury last year, and it's imperative, as you mentioned, he has to come. He can't be a role player at defensive end. He has to come in and be a stalwart at the left defensive end position, and he needs to take pressure off the Brandon Grahams and Fletcher Cox. And when they're being double teamed on the other side, he needs to get to the quarterback. So he's definitely going to have to find a way to do that, to stay up, to stay healthy, and stay on the field for the Eagles.
My comeback kid is a man who's coming back home, Deshaun Jackson. I think he is, as we spoke about a bit earlier in the episode, he is going to be very important to this offense. He's going to spread the field more. Last year, we just had a bunch of big receivers who were kind of sticking close, running into each other because they weren't really true downfield guys. You saw Aguilar go once in a while and Jeffrey go once in a while, but Jackson isn't always downfield. He's going down the field, and what's he going to do once he gets 15 yards downfield? Who knows? So I think he will be my comeback kid, not for injury reason, but because he's coming back home and helping us win our second Super Bowl.
Yeah, let's hope so. Rising star, who you got?
I got Dallas Goedert. We spoke about how we have the best two tight ends in the NFL, which I find it crazy. Argue us on the wide receivers because I don't believe we have the best wide receivers, but I will argue till the end of time on the tight ends. No one has an Ertz and Goddard combination like we do. And I think that he will have a big year too because of Deshaun Jackson and because they use more two tight end sets. I think they used it the most of any team in the NFL last year, or very close to.
They will use it a lot this year.
Yeah, so I think he has a ton of potential to rise and to break out and to really show that he can step in and be a number one tight end. As much as we all love Zach Ertz, and he will remain our number one tight end, to have two of them and to be able to unleash two guys who are 6'6" and 270 pounds or whatever they might be is scary to think of in an offense.
I agree with you. I went with Miles Sanders. Now, he does have a bit of injury concerns here early on in camp, but the Eagles like him and like him a lot. Again, they drafted him in the second round. They're going to use him a lot. And, Jordan Howard only has a year left on his contract. So who knows if they're going to re-sign Jordan Howard? And, Jordan Howard, Darren Sproles are on the last year of their deals. We know with Corey Clement, Josh Adams, Wendell Smallwood, Boston Scott, like we really don't know what we have with them. Miles Sanders has a chance to be a legit number one back in the league if he can stay healthy, obviously. So the Eagles are going to find a way to get him on the field, and they're going to use him. They're going to run the football more this year than I think they have in the previous years. And that's going to be because they actually have legit running backs. Unlike last year, when they were up in the Tennessee game, when they were up in the Carolina game, they couldn't run the ball because who were you going to hand it off to? But now that they have legit running backs, we're going to see them run the ball a little bit more. And Miles Sanders, I think, is going to be key. He might not win Rookie of the Year. That's probably going to be Kyler Murray, but he's definitely going to make a name for himself.
Agreed. I think it's important that he makes a name for himself, and I think that we are really going to use him more than Howard, because I don't think we see Howard as more than a 1-year thing, like you said, because he's going to command probably a decent amount of money, more than we can pay. So to know what we have in Sanders and to know that we can be comfortable in letting Howard walk is definitely imperative for us this year.
Yep. All right, so next category, don't forget about, I went with Deshaun Jackson. And the reason why I went,
how could you forget?
But listen, a lot of people around the league might think he's 32, he's not going to be as fast. Don't forget about my mans, all right?
Oh, look at Eagles Twitter as soon as the signing happened.
Oh, well, we never wanted him. He never wanted to leave. We never wanted him to leave. We blame Chip Kelly for that mess. But look, and also when it comes about, don't forget, Carson cannot forget about him. Deshaun, as much as we love Deshaun is the type of guy where if you're sending him down the field 3, 4, 5 plays in a row and you don't throw it to him, he may get a little bit mad. And you can't blame a guy when you're running 50 yards at a time, full sprint down the field. So Carson cannot forget about Deshaun, get him the ball. It might be smart, in the first 15 scripted plays, try to get him a screen here and there, get him some easy catches, get him involved in the game so he stays involved in the game. Do not forget about Deshaun Jackson.
Absolutely. I mean, you want the defense to constantly be thinking, we need to cover him. We need to cover him. We need to cover him. You need to take advantage of the fact that defenses know that they're gonna have to man up on a lot of these guys because there's just so many weapons that who do you come off of to move a double to? So I agree with that. My don't forget about is Darren Sproles. We can't forget about what he's done in prior years for us and how important he's been to our offense. I mean, what do we have in Corey Clement even? I don't even know. So how crucial it is for Darren Sproles to be that pass catching back, that change of pace back, that long yardage back, that punt returner. So I'd say don't forget about Darren Sproles. So don't forget about the veterans.
Yeah, and you mentioned Corey Clement. He just returned to practice. So it's going to be interesting.
He's another one. He's just like Matt Collins. It's like, man, get your knees together. I don't know what you got to do, but get your stuff together and get out on the field because he proved he could be an instrumental part of our team, but the injuries.
Yep. All right, so next category, needs to rebound. Who you got?
I got Ronald Darby. We're paying this man $8-9 million this year on a prove-it contract. And all he's been for us is basically 1 or 2 games and then injured or going down with an injury. So please, Ronald Darby, prove it. Rebound. Show us that we can invest in you long term in this secondary.
I went with Sidney Jones. Again, you know how big of a huge of a fan I am of Sidney Jones. His first 2 years, obviously his first year he only played Week 17 against Dallas in an eliminate role. But last year he had a bunch of injuries, and that kept him off the field. Every time he went down, we were looking at he was holding his foot, Achilles area. Now we need this guy to rebound, and with Ronald Darby on a 1-year deal, with Jalen Mills, he's a 7th round pick. He's the future of this secondary. So it's going to be very important for Sidney Jones to prove that the Eagles did not waste a 2nd-round pick on him and to prove that he is, that he could play like the top corner coming out of that draft, 3 years ago.
It's fair. I think any cornerback who was injured last year needs to rebound. They
That
need
makes
to
sense,
prove
yeah.
it to us, basically, because we had all these no names. We fielded the most cornerbacks in NFL history. So we need these guys to really rebound and show their worth because a lot of them are playing for contracts. Crayvon LeBlanc,
Yeah.
Sidney Jones is probably nearing the end of his rookie
He
contract.
gets a 4-year deal, and this is year number 3. So
Yeah, and Darby, he's on his prove it deal. Jalen Mills is on his last year. So a lot of these guys need to rebound and prove it, or we have no issue moving on because we got Maddox and Douglas. We got some other young guys who are fully competing for positions and not
yeah.
getting injured.
Yep, they're hungry. All right, next category, dark horse. Now I know I kind of bashed him a little bit earlier, but I'm going to go with Jordan Howard. He is going to be the number 1 running back to start the year. He's going to see the bulk of whatever carries. Now, obviously, the Eagles aren't a 20 to 25 carry per game or for a guy type of offense, but when he has the 3rd most rushing yards in the NFL since he's been in there, behind Zeke and Todd Gurley. Obviously, the last couple of years, they've progressively his yards per carry and his yardage totals have progressively gone down. But the Eagles have struggled on 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, 4th and 2. They have somebody that can get those yards now. Jordan Howard was really good at that with the Bears, and now the Eagles have somebody who they can go to. And now, obviously, I mentioned earlier, Miles Sanders is probably going to become your lead back towards the back half of the season. But early on, it's going to be the Jordan Howard show, and he's going to have a chance to go out there and prove that somebody is going to give him a nice contract next year.
Absolutely. I can agree with that as a dark horse, but my dark horse, and I've been seeing articles written about him being a dark horse and being underrated and flying under the radar, Camus Grugier-Hill. At the linebacker position, I know that they've loaded up the linebacker position. You got Brown, you got Bradham now, but Camus Grugier-Hill is that number 3 linebacker, and there's not much competition behind him. But he probably, you saw him last year, he has heart. He wants to compete. He wants to be on the field all the time, and he's not just going to let Brown and Bradham take the bulk of the linebacker shares. I think he's going to really try to cut in. He's athletic. I find him more athletic than Brown and Bradham, so he has that potential to be that guy who can chase down tight ends and make plays with a bit more polishing of his game. So I think he's a dark horse that a lot of people are sleeping on because of Brown.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. And Zach Brown started camp not really participating that much. He started, then when he was getting on the field, it was with the 3rd team. This week he's gotten with the 2nd team, so he's moving his way on up the depth chart. But there was a reason why Zach Brown wasn't on a roster until late in the offseason. So it's definitely going to be interesting. We know Nigel Bradham's going to be on the field. The Eagles play primarily 2 linebackers, so it's definitely going to be interesting to see who's it going to be. Is it going to be Brown? Is it going to be Grugier-Hill? Our last category, under the radar, who you got?
Well, I'm going back to that defensive line because I think that we were ranked that number 1 defensive line because of the depth, because of the pieces behind Jackson and Cox. So I'm going Tim Jernigan. I think he's going to fly under the radar, but his importance, if he's able to stay healthy and play a full season, is vital to Jackson and Cox to be able to rotate out, to be able to like that Super Bowl season, have Cox ready to play 100% of snaps through the playoffs, to keep him healthy, to keep him a bit rested, to not have him playing 100% all through the season. And I think Tim Jernigan will be an absolute instrumental part to that.
Yeah, and you mentioned Malik Jackson. I was listening to an interview he did with 94 WIP with their midday show, Joe DeCamara and John Ritchie, and he just seems like a likable person. And he's never played in a defense where your number 1 priority is get to the quarterback. You can tackle the running back on the way to the quarterback, but go straight forward, go and get to the quarterback. And he was dominant when the Broncos beat the Panthers for in the Super Bowl a couple years back, and that's what got him the big contract with Jacksonville. So Tim Jernigan definitely providing that depth is going to be key for both Cox and Jackson. Now I went with Dallas Goedert. Now I know you put Dallas Goedert as your rising star. I only put him as under the radar because he's behind Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz broke the tight end record for catches last year, and we know that Zach Ertz, is Carson Wentz's, favorite target. But you mentioned it earlier. Dallas Goedert has the potential to be a number 1 tight end. And nobody outside of Philadelphia is talking about him. We know what he can do. Philadelphia knows what he can do. But the national media, the national pundits, they don't really talk about, the depth that we have at that tight end position. Even Richard Rodgers, we know what he can do catching those Hail Marys from Aaron Rodgers. So he's probably going to be the third tight end. But Dallas Goedert has a chance to really make a name for himself this year and, kind of come out of the shadow of Zach Ertz. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how Dallas Goedert does in his second year, knowing the full complement of plays in the playbook. And, when we get down to the red zone, I mentioned it time and time again. You have 6'4", Alshon Jeffrey, 6'4", 6'5", J.J. Arcega-Whiteside, 6'6", Zach Ertz, 6'6", Dallas Goedert. Who are you going to cover? Good luck.
Then you'll have little Deshaun Jackson just flying around the back of the
end
zone.
Darren Sproles coming out of the back of the backfield.
Yeah, you can't forget how hard those little guys are to cover in the red zone too. If it's a prayer ball, they won't help. But if you can zip one through the defense, those guys are equally as important as having 4 6'5" players running around ready to catch a jump ball.
Again, like I mentioned, good luck to opposing defenses. All right, so that was a fun segment. We didn't have any of the same. Finally, I mean, we kind of were thinking the same-ish. We had some same names, but we're definitely going to keep going forward with stuff like that as we go through the Kelly Green Hour. And now, to finish off this training camp edition of the Kelly Green Hour, let's talk about, we are less than a week away from preseason game number 1, Eagles hosting the Tennessee Titans. Tell me something, what you're looking for, who you want to see. I doubt we're going to see Carson. If we see Carson Wentz, it's going to be for a series, if that. But I doubt, it's going to be the Nate Sudfeld show, the Cody Kessler show. We're going to get to see a lot of the young guys. They're going to come out here, we mentioned it earlier, to prove that they can play in the NFL. So give me some of your keys that you're looking forward to in the first preseason game against the Tennessee Titans.
This may sound weird, but I'm actually looking forward to watching Nate Sudfeld. I mean, we got so used to the comfort of Nick Foles, and now we don't have Foles. We don't have anyone to fall back on. We have Nate Sudfeld. So I really want, good, if you don't use Carson Wentz through the preseason, that's what I want to see. I want to see Nate Sudfeld cover like 2 quarters, 3 quarters every single game, and because he's clearly the future. You're not going to put Kessler. By what I hear, Thorson won't even make the team. I don't even think he's worthy of a practice squad stash at this point. So you got to see what you have in Nate Sudfeld. You got to give him a chance to get out there. The organization in general has been very high on him, but everything we've seen from him when he's come out has been iffy. So I really want to see some good things from him, and he's going to get to play with the full complement of players. He'll probably get to play with some of the 1s, some of the 2s, some of the 3s, some of the practice squad guys. So I'm really interested to see what happens with Nate Sudfeld and to get to watch him play, to see if he gets a bit more comfortable, but not too comfortable, but like kind of see if he can get into that Foles-like groove where if Wentz goes down, we can trust this guy. And
before you continue, talking about that quarterback position, I think the Eagles only keep 2 quarterbacks. It's going to be Wentz. It's going to be Sudfeld. Kessler will probably be on the practice squad. I think he's eligible for the practice squad, whatever it is. But that's how much confidence I have in Carson Wentz going forward. They're not going to need to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster, and I still disagree with that. We talked about at draft time when Clayton Thorson got selected. They wanted Easton Stick, but when the Chargers took him right before they were to select, they kind of rushed into drafting a quarterback. I don't think Clayton Thorson, they probably could have signed after the draft.
I agree. I've said it over and over. He probably was headed towards being a UDFA, and they just jumped because, like you said, they lost the guy they wanted. So they just impulsively said, well, we need a quarterback, and they took who was probably the next best in line, but probably way too soon. Shouldn't have even been in the 7 rounds.
Definitely way too soon. Some of the things that I'm looking forward to besides, the quarterbacks and seeing the backups. Again, those young defensive ends. I want to see them up against another uniform. Josh Sweat, Joe Osman, Vinny Curry, Sharif Miller. I want to see these guys in game action, NFL action, and see what they have. Now, yes, they're not going up against starter caliber players, but they're going to be going up against players of their same caliber. They should dominate. They have to dominate. We need to figure out what we have at the backup defensive end spots.
Agreed, because at this point I have all 6 of the defensive ends that we basically have at camp making the roster, because it's so thin. It thins out. You have Graham, you have Barnett, and then no disrespect to Curry or Sweat, but Curry's Curry and Sweat, we don't really full on know what we have with them. So I have 6 defensive ends on the team for that reason, because there is no true backup. The backups, it's just going to be a rotation between Curry, Sweat, Miller, Osman, and then Graham and Barnett getting in the bulk of the work there.
Now, obviously as camp goes and things could change, if Howie Roseman and Doug Peterson do not see what they want to see from the defensive ends, we have about $20 million in cap space. Does Howie call up the Houston Texans and inquire about Jadeveon Clowney?
I just don't know. I don't like the idea. Eventually, it eats into the cap. He worked so hard to get that cap space. He got the Wentz extension. He has the bulk of our offense locked down until like 2022, I think. So he's done so much work that you don't want to just impulsively go on that move because you don't know what you have to give up. I think you'd have to give up a lot more, especially the Texans. A lot of teams probably look at the Eagles and they see the threat. So they're not going to say, oh, we'll give you Jadeveon Clowney like Jay. We'll give you Clowney for a 4th or something.
Now they'll have to give up a first round pick.
I don't think it gets that. Yeah, I think it gets a lot, like probably maybe a prospect too, but one of the prospects we have in a pick.
I don't know. If you think about it though, if the Eagles were to trade for Clowney and you gave up a first round pick, that first round pick's going to be in the late 20s. It's going to be a pick that the Eagles would probably have traded anyway, because usually when they have those late first round picks, they very rarely, under Howie Roseman, they very rarely use it anyway. They trade it. So, it's definitely something you have to see as the preseason goes on. You mentioned we know what we have with Graham. We know what we have to an extent with Derek Barnett. But if those other guys aren't producing, it doesn't hurt if you go out and get an athletic freak like Jadeveon Clowney. You put him on this defensive line. Jadeveon Clowney, Malik Jackson, Fletcher Cox, and Brandon Graham. Offensive lines in the NFL, good luck. I know I said it before about defenses trying to prepare for our red zone offense, but that front four will make our secondary 1,000 times better.
Agreed. I think it's like 100 times better right now anyways. So, but you don't want to step on like the toes of Derek Barnett as well. I think you got to see what you have in him. You invested a high pick in him. You bring in Clowney and suddenly Barnett's pushed, and suddenly you go from having let's call it 70%, 75% snap count to the 50s probably. And are we truly seeing what we got in Derek Barnett come the time where Clowney's contract's up or another contract's up and we have to move on? I guess I kind of just have an eye out for the future as well with some of these guys. Is just you don't want to push a Sharif Miller or that would probably push a Joe Osman off the roster when they've been so high on him.
Would you rather have Jadeveon Clowney or Joe Osman?
Absolutely Jadeveon Clowney, without a doubt. But I guess at the end of the day, we have to think, do we want multiple championships or do we want one big run, one big push?
Let's be real. Okay, so you mentioned it. Our offense is pretty much signed through 2022. You look at our defense. Graham is signed. Cox is signed. Jackson is signed. Sidney Jones, if he proves to be what we think he's going to be, he'll get signed. We're going to need some safeties. Brad on the side.
The linebackers are getting older.
But we have $20 million, and Howie Roseman is a genius with the cap. He would make it work. You can get multiple championships by trading a first round pick. and one of the corners, Jalen Mills possibly or something like that, to the Texans.
The Texans are not
Clowney.
taking the first. They'd probably ask for a second to take on Mills. They'd be like, really, you better give us something a little bit extra to take that thing on.
I'm just saying, like, you can win multiple championships by making that move. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but hypothetically.
Hypothetically, yes.
You're giving up a late first round pick for the former number 1 overall pick who's 26 years old. Just think about that. He's 26. You would have him for the next at least 5 years. I would not see any issue with that.
I wouldn't see any issue either. I just don't think it happens. From a realistic standpoint, I just don't see it happening.
It probably won't.
I don't want to be the negative.
I like to have the debate, though. I like to have that debate. All right. Before we end things, we're going to open up our mailbag. We actually got some questions this week, thank God. All right. So our first question came from Kano at _Arlu. Are there any concerns about Miles Sanders' durability?
Well, I kind of responded to it a bit over Twitter. I thought there was concerns with it due to his lack thereof touches. A lot of people said in college, it's great that he didn't have that many touches because now doesn't have a whole lot of tread on the tire when he comes to the NFL. But in fact, sometimes I think it's a bit opposite to that because it doesn't get you full on prepared for the workload that you have to carry in the NFL, which is my concern. So my concern with durability doesn't come from injuries in the past. It comes from his lack of work that he got through 3 years. He got like 1 year of
being behind
decent work. Behind Saquon Barkley, 1 year over 200 carries. Like that's 250 carries when there's some people coming in with 400 or 500 carries. I'm not worried about the tread on the tire. If you got 400 or 500 carries through college and you know what you're coming into, you know the workload that you have to handle. So I guess the durability concerns for me come from can he handle even doing 15, 20 carries, playing 25, 30% of snaps out of that backfield.
Yeah, and I also think having a Jordan Howard and Darren Sproles ahead of him will allow him to ease in. So he won't have to right away have to be the go-to workhorse back. But it's definitely going to be intriguing. I am a little bit worried because he had a hamstring, I think it was, injury. Then he got blown up by or got hit hard by Russell Douglas the other day, and he went into
and it was something to do with his foot. So
so there are concerns.
If the start of things wrong with his legs are starting in the first training camp, we haven't even played a preseason game. There are definitely some things to worry about.
Our next question, I think we kind of touched on this. Who are the best options at the corner and nickel? So your 3 cornerbacks for week 1.
Yeah, I think I agree with your earlier statement. I think you got to assume at this point Rasul Douglas, Sidney Jones, and Avonte Maddox. Yep. I mean, I don't see Darby ready, although they say he will be. Cravon LeBlanc, definitely not. They're not going to rush him back. And Jalen Mills, I don't know. I can't. I mean, the guy still can't play. He's been fighting a foot injury since January. Beyond January, October. Yeah. So, I mean, light began to be shed on it in January, I think. So, I mean, we're sitting there like 8 months later, and he still can't practice. I don't know.
It's definitely has to be the most bizarre thing. Who knows? John Ritchie did bring up a point where a lot of players, if they feel like they're about to be cut, they will stay injured so that they can't get cut. Something weird like that. I don't think this is what's happening, but with the type of talent we have at that cornerback position, Jalen Mills, even if he was healthy, might not be a starter. So who knows what's happening there?
The heart that Mills plays with, I don't think he'd be concerned about being cut. He'd come out and he'd play, he'd perform, he'd do his thing. If he gets cut, then at least he knows what he did. He seems to have a lot of heart.
Yeah, that's true. All right, next question. Who is the surprise? Or who is the surprise of camp so far that you think makes the final 53?
Oh, wow.
I'll let you think about it. I'm going to go with Alex Singleton, linebacker. I think, he's going to be he has an opportunity to be a big special teams type of player. And, if given the opportunity, who knows if he might be able to make some plays on the field. But we know it's Nigel Bradham. We know Zach Brown most likely. And we know Kamugruje Hill. LJ Fort, probably. There's 4 linebackers. Do the Eagles decide to keep 4, or do they decide to keep 5 or even 6? Does TJ Edwards make it? Alex Singleton. I hope Nate Gary does not make it. But I think if the Eagles decide to keep 5 linebackers, it could come down to TJ Edwards and Alex Singleton. And in my early training camp 53-man roster, I had TJ Edwards. But from all accounts, Alex Singleton's having a really good camp.
I agree. I had TJ Edwards and us keeping 5 linebackers too. I guess my choice will be Mark Michel. Mark Michel has shown up really well so far at camp. He's a speedster too, so it's probably a good thing. He could probably be good in the slot. You could use him when Jackson needs to get off the field, when Aguilar needs to get off the field. Assuming what we see in the preseason is what we saw in training camp, and he can really show out with people on his level throughout the preseason, then I think he makes the team over some of those other guys, because I think Greg Ward, we've seen it over the past couple years, he can bounce between practice squads, but he always seems to come home. And Carlton Agudozi, I think eventually he can make a team with that size and the way he can get up and get a ball, but I think he could be on a practice squad. And then Braxton Miller's, I'm up in the air. Let's get some fresh blood. So Mark and Michelle.
Okay. All right. Our final question comes from ANY podcast member Shane Mead. What shall we set the over-under on bets that he loses to me during the NFL season? He's thinking about 33.5.
So I gotta know. Yeah, I gotta know. Like, what are these bets you guys do?
So we always do like dumb bets, but we have a black book where we have a bunch of bets, and he very rarely beats me in bets. And he just always wants to bet me on something, and I typically win. It could be about anything. The one thing that I can't remember. We did a bet. We were watching the Alabama-Clemson game from 2 years ago, the national championship game. And we actually did a bunch of like in-game prop bets for that. And he actually won the majority of them. So I was shocked at that. But yeah, we do a bunch of bets, whether it's for a season bet. We do fantasy football. So last year in the ANY podcast fantasy football league, he won the championship. All his losses though came to me. I didn't make the playoffs. If I would have made the playoffs, he would not have won the championship. He and then we did another league together, and he played me in that one and didn't beat me. Like, I don't think he's ever beaten me in fantasy football. My team was really bad in the ANY podcast league last year, and I just beat him, like dominated him in both games. So me and him will probably have some fantasy football bets. We'll figure. We have like a Scott Kingery bet right now. He says Scott Kingery will have over 20 home runs on the year. I said he won't. He's got 13 now. It's gonna probably be closer than it should be. But Kingery's batting average has dropped like 40 points, and who knows why. But it is what it is. We'll see who wins that one. But yeah, me and Shane, you'll definitely hear about him. We always talk about our bets. We'll figure something out when we come draft time for our ANY podcast fantasy football.
It honestly sounds like he's not a very good gambling man.
You can discuss that in your next Crossing Borders episode. Just bring it up, and just let's see what he says about it. See if he can play and see what he says. But yeah, I think you should bring it up in the next episode of Crossing Borders.
Okay, maybe I'll have to make a bet.
There you go.
Live bet.
There you go. Make a bet with him. You'll probably win it. All right. It was really good finally getting back into the Kelly Green Hour. We are going to do a show within the next couple weeks based around the top NFL players of 2019 list. Because that list was absurd.
I don't even know if I can honestly get into that, because I think that it'll be an hour of just
rage. That's fine. That's fine. It's gonna be me.
You know what? I'm gonna be honest. It's not even rage over the Eagles players and where they're positioned. It's just rage over it in general. It's like going back to high school and voting on like best smile and all the popular kids getting it or something. And like it just feels like high school all over again.
Yeah.
Popular people, and that's what it's all about.
Like, we're going to obviously keep it Eagle centric, but we're definitely, I mean, like the fact that Lane Johnson is not on the list. How? I have no idea how that happened. The 27 players were named above Fletcher, like 14 quarterbacks were named above Carson. Okay, I don't want to get started, but it's going to be me. It's going to be you. We may get former ANY podcast member Kevin Tuskovich. He might join us. We might get Shane or Rob on this, but we are going to have a hour long, try to have a discussion, but it'd probably be a little, we might get up in our
match.
I
just have to say one thing though. Thank God Dak Prescott did not make that.
Oh my God!
As that countdown went up, and I saw some quarterbacks going, I was like, man, if I see Dak Prescott,
it was bad enough that Kirk Cousins was 20 spots ahead of Carson Wentz and Baker Mayfield and Deshaun. Like, it was bad enough that all those quarterbacks were ahead of Wentz. But if I would have went to the NFL Network studios in New Jersey. I think they're in Mount Laurel. They're somewhere in Jersey, and I would have burned the place down.
I don't blame you. I mean, I saw a bunch of tweets from Skip Bayless after, and he's like putting his Dak Prescott jersey in a garbage and saying that this list is a joke. You want to say that this list is a joke because of that? Oh yeah, I saw him on a 3-minute rant the other day about why he hates the Eagles and why they're no better because of Jason Peters' "show me the ring" comment.
Yeah,
and I'm just like, man,
forget. I don't even want to talk about Skip Bayless.
You like show me the ring, the one ring, and you have 5 rings, but yet you haven't won a playoff game in 20 years. Like, come on, let's go.
Right, you have to pull out a VHS tape to watch your Super Bowl highlights. We can pull out a DVD.
We can pull out a Blu-ray. Screw the DVD.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. All right. This was a little over hour of the Kelly Green Hour. Again, in a couple weeks, we'll do the Kelly Green Hour based on the NFL Top 100 Players of 2019 list. Connor and I will be back next week for the People's Take as we're heading into SummerSlam in Toronto. I'm pretty sure it's in Toronto. So we'll have hopefully a good card, hopefully a good showing for that. So we will be recording that next week. And don't forget to watch the Eagles-Titans preseason game Thursday night at 8 p.m. Actually, no, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time, which would be 8:30 your time, I think.
Correct.
Connor. But yes, finally, Eagles football returning to the link. We're 38 days away from week 1, the Philadelphia Eagles hosting the Washington Redskins. For Connor, I'm LJ. We're going to send it out to the Jackdaws to send us out here. Thank you for listening to the Kelly Green Hour.